top-down classic Zelda gameplay. Dungeons as far as the eye can see. I never did own a Game Boy when I was younger, so I never had a chance to play Link's Awakening when it released, but I finally got there with the remake, and outside of a couple small issues, it did not disappoint. Welcome to completion number 25 of the Potato Backlog Project. Started in January 2023. For more information, check the description below. Stick around to the end of the video for the ever-elusive but always inclusive Tater Raider. Let's talk about The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. The original Game Boy release of Link's Awakening is considered by many to be one of, if not the best Game Boy game release, and one of the best Legend of Zelda releases in the series. There was a time when mobile gaming on the go was very limited by today's standards. Nintendo creating a game this big, this in-depth, this expansive for a handheld is just something that hadn't been done before. How fitting that it would then get a brand new remake in 2019 for the Nintendo Switch, a partially mobile system itself. Nintendo went all out with this remake, and short of some slowdown frame rate issues in certain areas, this is almost the perfect Zelda game. It's also fitting to me that this was the follow-up release to Breath of the Wild for the Zelda series. Breath of the Wild is an amazing game in its own right, but its goal was to reimagine the series and take it in a new direction. Some fans just wanted the old formula back. Dungeons, items, secrets, everything they were comfortable and familiar with. Well, it's all here. Even for someone like me who never had the chance to play the original or the Game Boy Color remaster, the experience here felt just as familiar as picking up A Link to the Past. Immediate recognition of how things worked, but no idea how it would all unfold. For all its familiarities gameplay-wise, the story itself is actually a bit of an anomaly for the series. The world you're presented with is like something out of a dream. Nothing quite seems as it is for our young adventurer. Instead of Hyrule, you're exploring Koholint Island. You adventure around unraveling the mysteries of the island and the giant egg that sits on top of it. Without spoiling anything, it was done well. It was fun, entertaining, and still felt like a Zelda game adventure story for me. The classic linear dungeon style story game progression is in full effect for Link's Awakening. You find a dungeon, you get an item in the dungeon that helps you solve the dungeon, you defeat the boss of that dungeon, adventure and explore some more, find the next dungeon, and rinse and repeat. That's me dumbing it down considerably, but it works, and it works really well. The dungeon designs themselves were all great, and at times can be pretty difficult. There's lots to keep track of, some clever things to solve, some great enemies, bosses, and settings. Even the things you need to figure out to open up the dungeons themselves are fun and satisfying to figure out. As I went through, I kept thinking how crazy it was that this was originally a Game Boy game. With the size of some of these dungeons, the island itself, how did they fit this onto a Game Boy cartridge? It's very impressive. There are 8 main dungeons with the bonus DX remaster dungeon included on top of that as well. There are some smaller side areas / mini dungeons to explore, and the entire island is full of secret chambers, hidden items, and upgrades. There's just no shortage of things to do and explore and find. Nintendo also added a dungeon builder of sorts not found in any other Zelda game to date. You unlock a place where you can go design and build your own nightmare dungeons. These can then be played through by yourself or someone else in your household. They can also be saved and transferred through amiibos. They built in gameplay challenges around the tutorial to help you learn how to create and build everything. I tried it out. I think it's a neat idea, but it really wasn't for me. I do like that they experimented with this though, that they tried something along the lines of Mario Maker, but with the Legend of Zelda series. I think that's really neat, and I think the potential's there in the future for something incredible. There was no online sharing option that I saw for this mode, but perhaps this was just more of them testing the waters to see if this is something players would enjoy and want to see more of in the future. Most of the items I found in the game were familiar to me as they were in A Link to the Past or some other Zelda game. The biggest item I hadn't really seen before was a feather item that gave Link the ability to jump. This was such an awesome addition. It added a lot to what they could do with dungeon design and puzzles. It didn't feel out of place for me at all. I also found it very useful and fun during enemy encounters and boss fights. The only gripe I had with it is that it had to take up one of my 2 item slots like 90% of the time. This game came out in 2019. Going to the item select screen to equip and unequip something every 35 seconds isn't something we should have to do today, especially when you're doing a blind first playthrough. You're trying things out, experimenting to find out what works. It's a minor annoyance, but one I think they could have handled slightly better. Just because this is the way it was always done doesn't mean we need to keep doing it that way. They did, however, assign your shield to its own button and running once you unlock these items. I was a huge fan of the shield and how useful it was in this game. It would have really pulled me out of the experience even more if I had to switch this onto an item slot, as I think you do have to do that in the original game. Another standout for me with this game visually and style-wise were the side-scrolling areas. Usually found in underground caves and some of the underwater areas, it's a throwback to the Adventure of Link game, the second release in the Legend of Zelda series. It would make sense they would incorporate this, as they were only one release removed from the Adventure of Link when Link's Awakening originally came out. The game designers obviously still had a fondness for the side-scroll perspective, and they found a way to fit it in here. The frame rate and slowdown issues are disappointing. I have to assume this is due to the limited power of the Nintendo Switch. It's not a deal breaker, but it is noticeable at times. Coming out of buildings in the town, if there's lots of grass and enemies, sprinting through long areas of grass, it can happen. Most of the time, everything is smooth and good, and thankfully none of the dungeons were bogged down by any of the slowdown, but I find it unacceptable that this is even a thing with this game, especially with how high Nintendo's standards usually are with quality. These issues might not exist in handheld mode. I didn't test because for me, the game should work the same in handheld as it does on the TV. All that being said, 4 happy potato faces out of 5. The easiest of 5 for me if the performance issues were non-existent. Great game design, fun experience, value for your dollar. It's all there. If you have a Nintendo Switch, you should have this game and you should play through it. And if you're interested in comparing it to the Game Boy Color version of the game for yourself, that version is now available for you to play on the Switch Online Game Boy section. So check it out. With that, the Backlog Project rolls on. Thank you so very much for watching. If you know somebody you think might enjoy these videos, consider sharing with them. It'll help us grow. Be kind to yourselves and others that deserve it. We're on to the next one. And let's get into it. The original Game Boy, the dungeon design... Man, talking is hard. The adventure around... Link. Sword.
I stole that Hylian shield off a little guy in a green hat.
He wasn't very happy. He was all, yeah, and let's go.